Так як дякую, сподіваюся, що це буде корисно і для інших учасників, які не змогли долучитися до нас, і відповідно ця зустріч буде викладена на каналі Держкіно пізніше. Метою цієї зустрічі стало такий перший крок для інформування щодо можливостей фонду, щодо того, які особливості подання, на яких етапах можна подавати, для того, щоб ви представити, зробити такий перший крок. Це буде початок із серії зустрічей, про які інші ми будемо анонсувати потім. І, ну, звичайно, таким поштовхом до цього стало те, що наразі відбувається конкурсний, третій вже етап конкурсного проєкту «1000 весна», який, сподіваюся, дасть фінансування багатьом українським проєктам. Відповідно, вони отримують можливість подаватися і приймати участь не тільки як виробництво національних фільмів, але й розглядати свої фільми як копродукції міжнародні з іншими країнами. І саме для того, щоб спонукати, розглядати якісь додаткові можливості фінансування, а це не тільки можливості фінансування, це й можливості ще залучення додаткової експертизи, це можливість залучення додаткових територій для релізу, і також це можливість виведення ринку, в принципі, на світову арену і отримання фідбеку від людей з різних країн, ми вирішили зробити цю сесію. Вона буде тривати приблизно годину. Відбудеться презентація мого шановного колеги Серджо Гарсія з Єврімаж. Він розповість англійською мовою про те, що це за фонд, які є можливості, які є основні помилки, які є основні етапи для подання. У вас є можливість записувати на коментарі питання, які у вас якісь будуть виникати по ходу його доповіді, писати в загальний чат. Після того, як завершиться доповідь, я ще дам такий невеличкий оверв'ю того, які проекти, в принципі, підтримувалися вже і які вже є історії успіху. І потім у нас буде можливість відповісти на запитання-відповіді. Знову ж кажу, що це лише перша така сесія для того, щоб розпочати знайомство з фондом. Ми будемо проводити їх на регулярній основі. Тож, давайте тоді не буду більше вже говорити, розпочнемо. It's a great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Sergio. Sergio, are you with us?
Thank you, Sasha. Yes, I'm with you.
So from this moment, the floor is yours, and I will just switch the mic, and later we will come back to Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I would like to share the presentation of Eurimages. Let me see if it's working. One second. Okay, now I think it's working. So I would like to give a brief presentation of Eurimages, but I will focus on the co-production program and on all the technicalities, the eligibility requirements, and the evaluation criteria. And after the presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have so that we can discuss them in detail. So my name is Sergio García de Leániz, and I'm a project manager at Eurimages. And just a brief explanation of what is Eurimages for those who may not be so familiar with the fund. So Eurimages is a cultural film fund of the Council of Europe. And Eurimages was created in 1989, and the Council of Europe was created in 1949. It's important to understand the difference between the Council of Europe, which is a pan-European institution that was created in 1949 and that has nothing to do with the European Union. So the program Creative Europe belongs to the European Union, it's part of the Commission of the European Union. But Eurimages is part of the Council of Europe. So we are two separate institutions, although we have, of course, collaboration, but it's important to know. The Council of Europe, we are based in Strasbourg in France, and that's where the Secretariat is also based. So, as I said, Eurimages was created in 1989. In the 80s, the European film industry was working very independently depending on the different countries. And in most of the countries, there was a big share of American films, and the rest of market share was mainly for national films, for domestic films. So there was a scarcity of international co-productions. And that's when Eurimages was decided to be created, first with 12 member states, and then the number of member states has increased significantly. So the purpose of Eurimages was to support the European film industry at the beginning. Now we say and beyond, because there is also Canada as a non-European member state, and to encourage cooperation between countries across borders and to promote the concept of international co-production. So Eurimages has now 40 member states. 39 member states are from the Council of Europe. You can see in the map those that are marked in blue. So basically, in Europe, most of the countries are part of Eurimages, with a notable exception, which is United Kingdom, as you can see. So this is important for you to know if you are going to co-produce a project with the UK. Projects in co-production with UK are, as a non-member state, are eligible, but subject to certain conditions, and I will explain those a bit later. And then also interesting to know, Canada is also a part of Eurimages. So co-productions with Canada are also eligible. And our latest member state to join Eurimages is Malta, that joined last year. So Eurimages has an annual budget of around 28 to 30 million euro. And it works with 3 meetings for the co-productions every year. And there was a significant reform in the fund in 2022, which has changed many issues, especially in terms of the assessment of projects. And so I will explain now how this is, but if you were familiar with the fund a few years ago, please note that the fund has experienced this reform and many things have changed lately. So the first thing to know about Eurimages is who does what, because there is a division between the secretariat, which is based in Strasbourg, and this is where I work, and the board, the national representative of Eurimages. So first I will explain what the secretariat does. So we are dealing with the day-to-day management of the fund, and we do the analysis of the applications for every call in terms of eligibility. So we do the technical and financial analysis and legal analysis, and we determine which projects are eligible and can be assessed or not. And then once the projects have been supported, we follow up, we do the management of the supported projects, the contracts, the payments, and as well as all the day-to-day activities. And we are also representing Eurimages in markets and festivals. So if you attend any market and festival where we are present, we are happy to meet with you to have one-on-one meetings to discuss about your projects that you want to apply with to Eurimages, or projects that have already been supported for which you have questions. And then in addition to the secretariat, there is a board of management. And as I said, the board of management is composed of the national representatives of each country. So in the case of Ukraine, this would be Sasha, and you can contact her also when you have an upcoming project to discuss any questions that you may have. So what we always suggest is that if you have a project that is an international co-production that is eligible to Eurimages and you want to apply to Eurimages, we always suggest before doing the application, and especially if it's going to be your first time, to contact the national representative on one hand to explain that you want to apply with the project, but also the secretariat. Before applying, we can give you technical guidance, limited guidance, but we can do a quick check of the financing plan, for example, and let you know what are the potential issues that need to be fixed, or any specific questions that you may have. So regarding the Board of Management, the Board of Management is, as I said, composed of the national representatives, and it meets twice a year to decide on the policy and on the budget of the fund. Then there is the Executive Committee, which is 1/3 of the national representatives on a rotating basis every year, and the Executive Committee has more meetings, between 6 to 9 meetings a year, to decide on more practical questions. And then, very important, the independent external experts, which are people from the film industry and who are the ones that are going to assess the applications and recommend which projects are supported. And this I will also explain with more detail when we get further in the presentation. So this is the first important thing, to understand who does what at Eurimages. Now, in terms of the projects that Eurimages supports, Eurimages supports around 100 projects per year, and it's really eclectic, the type of projects. So Eurimages is it is a cultural fund, so it has a cultural approach, and it favors auteur-driven independent filmmakers. But this said, it's open to all type of feature films. It can be, of course, animations, documentaries, fiction films, children films as well, but also all kind of genre films are welcome. As I said, the fund prioritizes more innovative films, so to say, author-driven films, rather than purely commercial films. But this said, of course, the fact that the film has a commercial value is something that is appreciated as well. To submit projects, the projects don't need to be necessarily stories that are focused in different countries. It can be local stories as long as they have a global potential. And there are no quotas in terms of what films need to be supported, or films from different countries. There are no quotas in terms of the selection of projects. So the core business of Eurimages, the main program, is the co-production support program. And this is the program that I will be mainly discussing in this presentation. But before we get into that, I would also like to talk about the other programs that are part of the fund, because they may also be interesting for you. On one hand, there is the promotion program, and I will speak a bit more about the different actions of the program right now. Then, also important to know, the film marketing and audience development program, as well as the exhibition support program. Those are the 4 programs of the fund. And in addition to this, there are 2 strategies, which are the gender equality, diversity, and inclusion strategy and the sustainability strategy. And I will also speak about the gender equality, diversity, and inclusion strategy. And as for the sustainability strategy, it's to support more sustainable production through training tools and other tools that we are putting at the disposal of the producers as well as the industry alike. So concerning the 4 programs, as I said, I'm going to focus on the co-production. But before we get into that, I would like to also make you aware of the film marketing and audience development program. This is a new program that was launched last year, and it's a program for those projects that have received already co-production support. It's a program to support their circulation. And then the promotion program has different lines of action, such as the Co-Production Development Awards, the New Lab Awards, and the sponsorships. And finally, there is the exhibition program, but this is dedicated for cinemas and programmers and exhibitors from countries that are complementary to the media program. So in this case, Ukraine is part of this program, but as I said, this is not addressed to producers, but to the exhibitors. Now, getting back on the promotion program, as I mentioned, there is the Eurimages Co-Production Development Award. This is important for you to know. If you have projects in development that are selected for co-production markets that are partnering with us, then there is a possibility of winning a 20,000 euro award. And for the current cycle of 2024-2026, we have partnership with 9 co-production markets: Berlinale, Cartoon for animation films in France, Vision de Réel for documentaries, Carlo Vivari, Cinelink, Cinekit for children's films, Baltic Event, Torino Film Lab, and Les Arcs. So if you submit a project and it's selected to one of those co-production markets, then in each co-production market there is one award of 20,000 euro that can be granted if the project is intended to be an international co-production. Then there are also the New Lab Awards, which are awards granted to projects that are experimental in nature. And here we have a partnership with CPH Docs and with Rotterdam for the present cycle. It's also important to mention that as from next year, we have the new cycle going on, and there are new partnerships for the Co-Production Development Awards and for the New Lab Awards. So this is also interesting for you in case you have experimental projects either in development or as work in progress. If they are selected for this co-production markets, there is a possibility of winning this specific award. And then, as I was mentioning before, for projects that have already received support to co-production, they can get additional support of up to 50,000 euro to develop a strategy, a film marketing and audience strategy. It's for projects that have received Eurimages co-production support and that have not yet received a festival release. So it's a strategy to prepare the festival release. And then there is a strategy of gender equality, diversity, and inclusion to reduce inequalities in the film industry, and it has a focus on gender inequality. And it's a number of measures and activities to promote gender equality. So among these activities, there is the Audencia Award, which is an award of up to 30,000 euro to the best female director in the festival in which the award is granted. And again, this is a partnership with different festivals that rotate every year. And then there are also the sponsorships and patronage. So again, these are activities, workshops that promote gender equality. For this cycle, as you can see, there are collaborations with workshops with labs such as Le Lab in France, Locarno Pro Step In, with MIFA, and the Pop-Up Film Residency, and others. So just to give you a view of in terms of the achievement as to getting gender equality, in 2014, when we started implementing this strategy, the number of co-productions directed by male directors and female directors was quite unequally distributed, and in the last years, nearly the 50% parity has been achieved. And now something specific, Eurimages has implemented a line of support to the Ukrainian film industry, and it has different actions. You may be already aware of them, but if in case you're not, just for you to know, there is a partnership that Eurimages has established with the Ukrainian Institute for the promotion program. And the promotion program is a program to support the internationalization of Ukrainian films. So when you have a film completed and you want to submit it to make the festival strategy. This program supports the festival strategy with up to €8,000 per project, and there are 7 projects supported annually. Then, in addition to this, there are the Eurimages Special Co-Production Development Awards. I have mentioned the Eurimages Co-Production Development Awards, but if you have a Ukrainian project that is selected at one of the co-production markets that partners with Eurimages, every year we grant, in addition to the Co-Production Development Awards, 3 special awards to Ukrainian projects. These are awarded in a rotating basis in the different partners that we have. And then finally, regarding the gender equality strategy, there are additional bursaries for Ukrainian female filmmakers in the programs that I had mentioned before. So all these special measures for the Ukrainian film industry are relevant for you to know. But then, as I said, I'm going to now focus on the co-production program. The co-production program is the main program of Eurimages. It takes up approximately 90% of the annual budget, and as I said, there are approximately 100 projects supported every year. I would like to start with this quote from the European Audiovisual Observatory. It says that European co-productions generated 3 times as many admissions as national films. This, I think it's a very interesting fact. Of course, not every project is meant or makes sense to be an international co-production. However, if you want to develop a project into an international co-production, it has many advantages. Of course, it has more challenges, but it has many advantages. One type of advantage is the obvious advantage. When you're partnering with other countries, you get access to financing in the co-producing countries. You get access to the market of those co-production countries in terms of circulation. And then it allows you to have a bigger budget and bigger production value for the film. But we also feel that there is an intangible value of international co-productions. The fact that you have to do an international co-production means that you need to develop a partnership, a relationship with other co-producers from other countries. You have to submit your project, probably when you're developing it, to co-production markets. You have to pitch it, and you get feedback from people from the industry from other countries, and this enhances the project. And this is probably also part of the reason why international co-productions get more circulation than purely national films. Now, of course, not every film must necessarily be an international co-production, because then there are other challenges. International co-productions, of course, have more costs, legal costs, financial costs. You have to sometimes shoot and do post-production in different countries. This adds complexity to the project. But I think that if you are developing a project as an international co-production, in that case, you should always consider the possibility of applying to Eurimages. It certainly makes sense. So I would not recommend to turn a national film into an international film just for the fact of applying to Eurimages. But if you are already considering a project with an international co-production structure, then you should definitely consider the possibility of applying to Eurimages. Just a little bit on the history of Eurimages. Eurimages has supported over 2,500 co-productions since its creation in 1989, with over 735 million euro support. And as an example, last year we supported 91 projects. Out of them, 62 were fiction films, but there were also 20 documentaries and 9 animated features. So, as I said, The average number of projects supported varies in terms of each year, but it's between 80 to 100 films. The majority of them are fiction films, but there is a constant growth in the number of feature documentaries supported, and also in terms of animated features. Now, getting to the basics of the program, of the co-production support program. So as I said, Eurimages supports feature films. They can be fiction, documentaries, or animation, but they need to be intended for a theatrical release. So it's purely SVOD films or television films or platform films are not eligible to Eurimages. So for Eurimages, we still request the theatrical release as an obligation. This is a conscious choice because we think that the theatrical release, even if it's getting more difficult due to the number of films produced in Europe and also in the rest of the world, but it gives an added value to the film in terms of visibility, and it also helps to the rest of windows. When a film has had the exposure of a theatrical release and also of a festival release, it helps to its circulation in the rest of windows. So the theatrical release is a strong requirement in the majority co-production country. We can be flexible with that criterion in the minority co-production countries, but as I said, films need to be intended for a theatrical release. That's the first thing to know. Then the second thing is that they need to be international co-productions between at least two member countries of Eurimages, two member states. As I was mentioning before, you can have a co-production with non-Eurimages member states, but there are certain limitations. The main limitation is that the financing from the Eurimages non-member states is limited to 30%. So, to put an example, if you have a co-production between Ukraine and France, that would be an eligible co-production because Ukraine and France both are member states of Eurimages. Now, if you have a co-production between Ukraine, France, and United Kingdom, it could be eligible as long as the participation of United Kingdom is limited to a maximum of 30%. And of course, the creative control needs to be in the hands of a producer of a Eurimages member state. You could also have a co-production with more than one non-Eurimages member state, as long as you have two member states. So to continue with the example, if you have a co-production between Ukraine, France, UK, and Mexico, to put an example, UK and Mexico are not member states of Eurimages. France and Ukraine are. So it could be eligible provided that the financing, the combined financing of UK and Mexico is limited to 30%. Okay, so that's in terms of the member states required for the co-production. And then in terms of the amount of support, the maximum support is 500,000 euro. And the support takes the form of a soft loan, which means that it is reimbursable from the net revenues. And I will explain this with more detail later in the presentation. There is now another possibility, which is if you request up to 150,000 euro support, then it's a direct subsidy and it's not reimbursable. So for smaller amounts, up to 150,000 euro, there you have a direct subsidy and you have no reimbursement obligations, which obviously simplifies the procedure once that the film is released and you don't need to submit the revenue statements. And then one very important point, and I will take a bit of time to talk about this, is that Eurimages supports official co-productions. So when you are developing your co-production, you need to make sure that the co-production structure is in terms with the eligible treaties, with the applicable treaties. Now, depending on the countries participating in the co-production, there are different treaties that could apply. If you are doing a bilateral co-production between two countries and there is a bilateral treaty in place, then it would be the bilateral treaty that would be determining the conditions of the co-production. In the absence of a bilateral treaty, or if you have a co-production between 3 and more countries, then it could be the European Convention on Co-production that applies, or the revised convention. And this will depend on whether, if all the countries that are involved in the co-production have ratified the revised convention, then it would be the revised convention that would apply. If one country that is involved in the co-production has not ratified the revised convention, then it would still be the European Convention of 1992 that would apply. And just to put an example of the differences in terms of the possibilities of the co-production structure, because that is very important. If you have a project, I will give an example, a co-production between Ukraine, Spain, and Netherlands, let's say, to put an exotic combination. So Ukraine, Spain, and the Netherlands all have signed the revised convention. So this means that the project would be, the applicable treaty would be the revised convention. This means that you could have a co-production structure of up to 80% maximum financing from one country and as low as 5% from the minority co-producer. If it would be a bilateral co-production, let's say Ukraine, Netherlands, then you could have up to 90% and up to a minimum of 10%. Now, if you have a co-production involving a country that has not ratified the revised convention, so that, for example, that could be a co-production Ukraine, Germany that has not signed the revised convention yet, and the Netherlands, then it would be the 1992 convention that would apply. And as you can see, the limits, maximum and minimum limits, are different than in the revised convention. In that case, the maximum percentage of financing from one of the countries would be limited to 70% and the minimum to 10%. And for bilateral co-productions, this would be 80 and 20. Now, if instead of the convention, it's the bilateral treaty that applies, then it depends of what each bilateral treaty mentions. So when you're preparing an international co-production and you are unsure of the partners, depending on which countries are going to join the co-production, please be aware that if there is a change from one country to the other, there could also be a change of the applicable treaty, and then this may require an adjustment to your co-production structure to fit the requirements of the applicable treaties. So this is a very important point when you are developing the co-production. And now another crucial point, which are the eligibility criteria for Eurimages. I will explain later how the whole process of applications goes. But before getting into that, the first thing to know is when you prepare an application to Eurimages, there is a certain criteria to meet in order to have the project become eligible. Each session, we receive around 100 projects, 100 applications, and out of them, approximately from 12 to 15 projects are not eligible. So there is a ratio of 15% of projects that are unfortunately not eligible for different circumstances. One of the potential circumstances is that the co-production structure is not in line with the applicable treaties, which is what we just have seen. But the main criteria why projects are not eligible is because they don't fit with the eligibility criteria. So here we have different criteria. The first one is in terms of shooting. So Eurimages is a top financier. It comes on board when the project is very advanced in the pre-production, and but it's not a post-production support program. So there is a limit to the shooting, and this is up to 50% of the shooting can take place prior to the decision. And in the case of documentaries, it's up to 80%. So to put an example with dates, there is a call of Eurimages in January, and the decision for this call takes place in March. If you want to apply to the call in January with your project, you can apply as long as the shooting has not started by March, or if it has started, you can only have shot up to 50% of the calendar of the shooting plan by the time of the decision is taken. So in March, you could have shot up to 50% of the shooting days. And as I said, for documentaries, there is more flexibility. It's up to 80%. We can see this a bit later also with the specific calendar, with the schedule. But this is the main thing to know. So Eurimages, you have to apply when the project is still in pre-production, or if it has shot, it must have shot only part of the shooting. This applies sometimes when you have a few days of shooting, and then you have the principal photography block a bit later. It's to be more flexible. Now, the second condition is in terms of the confirmed financing. So in order to be eligible, a project needs to have at least 50% of the financing confirmed in each country of the co-production. So if you have a trilateral co-production, to put an example, between Ukraine, Greece, and Italy, you would need to have at least 50% of the financing confirmed in each co-producing country. So the 50% is not for the whole project, but it's 50% requirement for each co-producing country. So this means that the more countries that are involved in the co-production, the more countries that need to comply with this requirement. And we will get into more detail about how to take a source of financing as confirmed in the next slide. But then, before getting into that, also there is an essential, an important point, which is the point test for Eurimages elements. For each type of projects, fiction, animations, and documentaries, there is a number of points which is determined by the nationality of the director, authors, main cast, crew, shooting locations, and post-production locations. You need to achieve a minimum number of points in terms of elements from the Eurimages member states, which means that if you are, for example, shooting in a country that is not a Eurimages member state, with main cast or crew that is not from a Eurimages member state, you are not getting points for these elements. If you don't reach the minimum number of points, then the project would be in principle ineligible, but there are exceptions, and this would be that the national authorities decide to grant national recognition to the film. But it's important for you to know, if you're doing an international co-production with a lot of elements from non-Eurimage member states be aware of this point test, and if the project doesn't meet the number of points, then you would need to contact the national authorities to get the pre-approval of the provisional recognition of the cooperation. And then something very important as well is the practical way of applying to Eurimage. All the application is online, and we recommend to do the applications as soon as possible. And I will get into more detail about this when we look into the calendar. But for the time being, I will first focus on the eligibility requirements now in more detail. So I was mentioning that you need to have at least 50% of the financing in place in each co-production country. And in addition to that, you need to have what we call one source of eligible financing in each country. And this is a bit tricky, but I hope I will explain it in detail. It means that you need to have in each country at least one source of financing that is either public support or a distribution MG in the specific country, or a TV co-production or license fee, or a VOD or SVOD or TVOD license, or a cash rebate or tax shelter. So to explain this in more detail, let's concentrate on our example. We have a Ukraine, Italy, France cooperation. In each country, you would need to have at least public support or a domestic and national MG, or a TV pre-sale, or a platform pre-sale, or a cash rebate. And then, in addition to this, you can have, of course, all of them. You can have public support combined with an MG, with television, and with tax credit where it's applicable. And then, in addition to that, you can also have the financing plan completed through equity investments or own investment, or deferrals of producers' fees or overheads, or third-party deferrals. But what you cannot have, because the project would not be eligible, is the financing of one country entirely made of what we call non-eligible sources of financing. So if you have only in one country equity financing and own investment, then the project would not be eligible. So you would need to have a combination of equity plus, for example, public support. Then the project would be eligible as long as it reaches the 50% confirmed financing. Also important to know, if you have an MG for international sales, the international sales, of course, count towards the 50% of the confirmed financing. What we request is that the MG of international sales is split pro rata between the countries involved in the co-production. But again, it would not be sufficient as an eligible source of financing for the financing of each country. So in each country, we request that there must be a specific national support of either public support or national MG or TV or platform support, but at national level. So this is very, very important. And now, in terms of the what do we request to confirm these financing sources? On the Eurimages website, you have a specific document. If you go to co-productions, there are the instructions to how to apply. So when you start filling your application online, our advice is to start, especially if it's your first time application, to start working on the application as soon as possible. You would need likely to start the process at least 2 weeks before the deadline, before the application deadline, but we recommend to start earlier to get familiarized with with our platform, and to be able to solve any issues that you may have by contacting us if necessary. So the first step when you want to do an application online is to request an account. And please note that this is not an automatic process, because before validating the accounts, we make sure that the production company is a production company eligible to Eurimages. So for this, you would need to foresee perhaps a couple of days until the account is validated. Once the account is validated, you can start working in the application, and once the platform is open for each of the calls. And when you start working on the application, you will have to complete different elements, and one of them is, of course, the financing plan. And for the financing plan, you need to submit evidence of each financing source to take it as confirmed financing. And each financing source requires different documents to take it as confirmed. In the case of public support, for example, what we usually request is, depending on the country, either the agreement signed with the public fund or a letter of intent indicating the amount of support, or the official publication where the amount of support is indicated. For all the documents, it's important to highlight that they need to be recent documents. So if there are binding documents like contracts, they can be older than 6 months. But if it's a letter of intent, they need to be not older than 6 months from the moment of from the application deadline. So make sure that all the documents are recent documents when you work on your application. Then for the distribution MGs, again, this can be either contracts or deal memos or letters of intent. But it's important that the letter of intent, if it's a letter of intent, they need to reflect the amount of the MG, the conditions, and they need to be recent. And the same thing applies for deals with broadcasters or with platforms. And then for the cash rebates, tax shelters, tax credits, since every country has a different system, in our website, we have indicated in the instructions on how to confirm financing sources, a list of the requirements for each country, because here there is a big variation. And then again, for the equity investments, we would request again the agreement signed with the investors or letters of intent. And for the own investments of the production company, we request a bank statement or a bank account that proves that you have sufficient funding to cover the amount of on investment indicated in the financing plan. And for deferrals, for the deferred fees, you would need to do a declaration of deferrals, and this would need to be indicated in the budget, of course. And one more thing in terms of the deferrals, there is a limit of a maximum of 15% of the total financing that can be taken into account as for the confirmed financing in terms of deferrals. So you can have up to 15% of deferred fees included in the financing plan as confirmed financing. And this 15% does not need to be split pro rata. So you can have 15% of deferrals in one country, but a smaller amount or no amount in other countries. So this was a bit the overview of the eligible requirements. And now in terms of the applications. So we have 3 deadlines per year. I have here the dates of 2026, but the dates of 2027 are very similar, and they are already published on our website, so you can have an idea. So depending on the main one of the main issues for you to determine is when to apply with a project. Because if you apply with a project, there are two possibilities. Either the project is eligible or not. If the project is not eligible, then the project would be withdrawn and it would not be evaluated. And you could have still a possibility of reapplying once more, provided that the project is eligible for a future deadline. But if the project is eligible and it is assessed, it's evaluated, it can either be supported or not supported, but you cannot reapply. So you can only apply once if the project is eligible, and if the project is not eligible, you have the possibility of reapply once more, only once more, and then if it's not eligible again, then you would not have the possibility to reapply. So it is essential to find the most adequate deadline for your project. What we always recommend is that you apply at the latest possible stage, because it means that the project will be more solid in terms of financing and in terms of the artistic criteria being in place. The cast and crew, all the other audiovisual materials, and the script. So, for example, but it's important to know, depending on when your shooting is, when could you apply? So let's say that you have a project that is shooting in summer 2026. I'm doing the example with 2026, but of course it would be the same for next year. So if you're shooting in summer 2026, the third deadline of the year in September is too late. You could apply to the first deadline, to the January deadline with the decision in March, or to the one in end of March with the decision in June, because shooting would not have started. Let's say that you are shooting, the shooting starts on the 1st of June. In that case, you could still apply to the second deadline of the 31st March, because the day that we take into consideration, which is the beginning of the evaluation, the 8th of June, by then you would have shot less than 50% of your shooting schedule. So in that case, the project would still be eligible. But if you're starting shooting on the 1st of May, for example, and your shooting is more than 50% by the 8th of June, which is when the evaluation of project start, then the project would no longer be eligible. So you would need to apply to an earlier deadline, in this case, to the deadline of January. And as I was mentioning, for documentaries, the shooting requirement is increased to 80% of shooting. For the shooting, what we take into consideration is we ask you to submit a full shooting schedule with the number of days, and we literally measure the number of days that have taken place before the evaluation meeting starts and the days after. And we do the math, and it has to be less than 50% of shooting by the deadline of 8th of June in the case of the second deadline, or we would take 9th of March for the first deadline, or 10th of November for the third deadline. So this is in terms of the calendar. And then the chronology. So for example, for the current deadline that we have now, the current deadline that we are going to open is the deadline of 8th of September. For this deadline, we opened the platform already a few days ago, so you could already, if you want to apply to the present deadline, and you have a project that is an international co-production, you could already request the account and start filling the application. The first thing that is published is the official exchange rates. For each call, there are official exchange rates that are based on the present date, and that you will need to use in the financing plan and in the budget. And then, very important, the day of the deadline, the platform of submissions closes at 12 noon sharp. And all the applications that have not submitted by the deadline can unfortunately not be taken into consideration. So what we strongly encourage is not to wait until the last day to submit the application, because every deadline there are some tragic cases of projects that were almost completed, but they were not submitted on time. They were submitted perhaps just a few minutes after the closing of the deadline, but they could no longer be submitted. And in those cases, there is nothing that we can do to help you. So what we suggest is to prepare the applications in advance, because we realize that it's a lot of work to prepare the application, and to make sure that everything is ready to submit the projects. When you start filling the applications, there are a number of alerts that the platform gives in terms of if a document is missing, or if there may be any potential issues. Some of these alerts would block the project, the application to be submitted. So, for example, if the financing plan is not coherent, then the application platform will prevent you from submitting the application. And sometimes the issues are really minor. So what we suggest is, if you have issues that prevent you to submitting the application, please feel free to contact us, the Secretariat, because we will try to help you solve the issues that you may have, so that you can submit your application. But again, if you wait until the last minute and you contact us last minute, we will of course try to help, but it may be too late to solve the issue. And in that case, if the project is not submitted, there is unfortunately nothing that we can do. Now, once that the deadline has closed, and we receive, as I said, a number of approximately 100 projects, the first thing that we do internally is we split these projects between the project managers, between my colleagues and myself. So we would split the project. Some of the project managers have different specialities. So I have there are a couple of colleagues that deal with documentary projects, another colleague who deals with animations, another colleague who deals with children's films. I am dealing mainly with genre films and also big budget films, and so on. But this division is not strict. So if, for example, you have been in contact with one of the project managers before the application to ask questions, and that project manager is familiar with your project, it may be the case that this project manager will continue working with you after the application, because that person already knows a bit about the project. So once the projects have been split, we start a period that lasts that lasts approximately 3 to 4 weeks. Usually it's 3 weeks, but in the second deadline we open it up to 4 weeks, because it's before Cannes, and it's a more complicated period. And in this period of 3 weeks, we determine the eligibility of projects. So during this period, it's very important that you are reachable and available, because we will analyze the applications, and we will be contacting you in case that there are any questions regarding the application. So let's say that if you have submitted a document that needs further clarification, we would be contacting you and giving you a tight delay to clarify this, or add any relevant information needed. And after this 3-week period, we would determine the eligibility. And as I said, your project can be either eligible or not eligible. If it's not eligible, it would be withdrawn, and you would have the possibility of reapplying to the next eligibility deadline, provided that the shooting has still not exceeded the 50% requirement for the next deadline. If it's eligible, then it goes to the evaluation. And this is now the stage that I will explain. So we have passed the eligibility, and then we go to the evaluation. What is taken into account for the evaluation of projects? So there are artistic and production criteria, and this seven criteria are taken into account by the experts, and I will explain later what is the role of the experts. But first, going into the selection criteria, we have on one hand the quality and the originality of the script. And here, my advice is that you have to submit the script in the original language and with an English translation, and if possible, also a French translation, but that's not compulsory. My recommendation is that since most of the experts will read the script in its English version, that the English translation is as good and as artistically developed as possible, because this is the version that the experts will use when assessing your project. Then another document is the director's notes, where the director has to explain the vision and style. And this is a document that is taken into account by the experts, and it's very important. And this is particularly so in case of first-time filmmakers, because this will be one of the tools that will help create an idea of the visual universe of the director to the experts when assessing your project. Then, of course, the contribution of the team involved and the level of artistic and technical cooperation, because Eurimages, one of the main objectives of the fund is to promote international cooperation. So the stronger the cooperation between the international partners is, the better. One question that I receive often is it better to present a project that is a bilateral co-production or a multilateral co-production? And my answer always is, what is essential is not the number of countries involved, but the level of cooperation. So it's perfectly fine if you have a bilateral cooperation, but as long as you have a strong cooperation between both countries. And then in terms of financing, the consistency and the level of confirmed financing. So of course, Eurimages, as I was saying before, is a top financier, is a fund that aims to cover the final 15% of the financing. The moment when it's more complicated to reach the final stages of financing, when usually you have to find this final financing through equity investors that require strong reimbursement conditions. That's when Eurimages feels that is essential to give additional support. And that's why Eurimages expects to receive projects that are in a very advanced stage of financing. So I have mentioned that 50% confirmed financing is the minimum threshold, but of course, the more financing that you have in place, the better. And then another aspect that is essential is the circulation potential of the project. Now, Eurimages is a cultural fund, so it is not necessarily circulation potential meant in terms of a sales agent in place, but it could be a festival circulation potential. So it is not compulsory to have a distribution agreement in place at this stage. But what we want to know is what is the circulation strategy of the film, and this is something that you can include in the producer's notes. So, for example, what are the festivals that you are aiming for and what are the reasons for that. And in terms of commercial distribution, if you have not yet signed a distribution agreement, but you are in negotiations with sales agents, with distributors, all the information, all the relevant information that you can include, the better to help understand what is the circulation potential of the film. And then the existence of measures to reduce the environmental impact of the co-production and the adherence to the values and aims of the Council of Europe, which means that the film is not openly promoting violence or pornography. And a bit more about the specific materials that you can submit. So Eurimage projects are evaluated, are assessed as a whole, as a global. So there is no point system on the different evaluation criteria that I have just indicated. So the best thing is that the package, the whole application is as strong as possible. And in terms of the materials, the specific materials, you need to provide a synopsis of the film, the script. In the case of documentaries that are not scripted, it could be a treatment, and then the director's note of intent that I have already mentioned, and the producer's note of intent, as well as any audiovisual materials complementary. If you have a mood board, if you have already, in the case of documentaries, some images shot, or if you have a teaser, that's of course additional audiovisual materials that are important to the project. And also previous audiovisual works of the director. If it's a first-time filmmaker, you can submit the short films or any type of film, school film that can give an idea of what is the visual universe of the director. And emphasizing again, the translation, having a good translation of the documents is crucial because most of the experts will read the documents translated and not in its original version, as I was mentioning before, for the script. And now about the experts and the composition of the experts that are going to assess your project. So the projects, as I said, we receive around 100 applications every session, and they are split into different groups. The projects are split into groups of, one group is dedicated to documentary features, another one is for first-time filmmakers, another for second-time filmmakers. There is also a specific group for big budget or films that are requesting over 400,000 euro support to the fund. And then there is another group for animations. And so the projects are split into groups of a maximum of 20 projects, but usually it's a bit less. And there are 5 experts in each group that are going to assess the project. The experts are independent external experts that are recruited through an open call that we do every 2 years, more or less. And there are experts from the film industry that can apply from any country as long as they have an expertise in international cooperation. The experts have different areas of expertise, and each group has experts from production, from directing, from sales and distribution, and also from other artistic categories such as festival programming or festival programmers or DOPs or other categories. And the way the experts work is once that the eligibility of projects has been determined, we send them all the materials that you have provided in the application, as well as the analysis the technical analysis that we have prepared at the Secretariat during the eligibility period. And they have to do an assessment of their group of projects a written assessment, and they do a pre-ranking of projects based on all the evaluation criteria that I mentioned before. The meeting, there is an online meeting that takes place for a full day, and it starts with the overall pre-ranking. We mix the pre-ranking of the 5 experts, and that gives a global pre-ranking, and the experts see the pre-ranking. We also share with them any news in terms of financing or artistic updates for projects that have taken place between the closing of the eligibility and the beginning of the evaluation meeting. And then they have a discussion that is moderated by the chair, and they evaluate all the projects, and they can decide if they want to modify the pre-ranking. And basically then there is a threshold of financing for each group, and the projects that are ranked over the threshold are finally recommended for support, and the ones below are not recommended for support. The experts make a recommendation, and then the executive committee validates the experts' recommendation. So this is a bit how the system works, and I realize that we are getting close to the end of the presentation. So I'm going to wrap up very quickly and then open the room for any questions that you may have. Just let's say that you have been successful and your project has been supported. Around 1/3 of projects are supported in every session, but 2/3 are not. And then the cash flow of the support of Eurimages is made into 2 payments. The first payment of 70% is paid when the support agreement is signed and when shooting has started, and then a number of elements have been submitted. And the second payment, the last 30%, is paid when the film has been theatrically released in all countries and the final audit has been submitted. And more specifically, this may be a bit specific at this stage, but it's important for you to know when you prepare the financing plan, is that when you want to request Eurimages support, you have 2 possibilities. Either to split the support proportionately in the co-production structure, or play with a disproportionate allocation of the support. Just to give a quick example, but this is something that we don't need to get into detail yet. For example, let's say that you are supporting a project such as the one in the example with a split of 50%, 30%, and 20%. You could choose to do a proportionate allocation, which would be 50, 30, 20, or you can choose to do a disproportionate allocation, such as the one in the example, which is 30, 20, 50%. You can do a disproportionate allocation within the maximum limit of 50% allocation to one of the co-producers, and with a minimum of 10%. But then there is the repayment that needs to be done, and this is done in terms of the proportionate allocation. And as I said, this rule is a bit tricky, so this is something that feel free to contact us when you have specific questions for your projects. And then one last thing, the figure of non-national co-producers. You may choose to have an international co-producer that cannot become an official co-producer because the financing, for example, of that producer is not reaching the minimum threshold. So, for example, if you have a co-producer that has only an international partner that has only 3% of the financing of the co-production structure, it cannot become an official co-producer, but you can add that producer in the financing plan in a figure that we call the non-national co-producer. So to put an example, you have a co-production between Ukraine and Poland, and you have also a small share of participation from a Bulgarian producer that has 3% of the financing. It cannot become an official co-production with Bulgaria because it doesn't reach the minimum threshold, but you can put the financing from the Bulgarian producer as part of the Ukrainian group, for example, or of the Polish group, and it would count towards the financing of the film, and that Bulgarian co-producer could participate as a non-national co-producer. So, and then finally, the rule about repayment. As I was mentioning before, if the support is up to 150,000 euro, then the support takes the form of a subsidy, and you don't need to worry about the reimbursement because it's a direct subsidy. But if the support is more than 150,000 euro and up to 500,000 euro, then you would have to repay from the net receipts of that the project generates. To simplify, because this is a complex matter, we consider that all the financing that is required for the project and where you sign agreements before the completion of DCP are part of the financing of the project and are not net revenues. But once you have closed the DCP, you have completed the DCP, all the pre-sales, distribution MGs, and deals that you close after that are considered as net receipts of the project. And then from those net receipts, you can deduct the distribution MGs, distribution expenses, but after that, Eurimages requests to recoup pari passu along with any other investor in terms of the financing that it has contributed to the film. So if Eurimages has given a support of 100,000 euro to a project that has 1 million euro budget, Eurimages would have 10% of reimbursement percentage. So keep in mind that you would need to allocate a 10% window of recoupment for Eurimages alongside any other investors in the waterfall. So this is, I have simplified a lot this last part of the presentation because otherwise it would take much longer. But now I would like to open the room for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear Sergio, thank you so much for your presentation. I will just add 1 minute summary from my side. Evgen, can I share my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay. While we are waiting, so I will start from the first question then. So if we are talking about eligibility, and there is it should be 50% from each country. So Sergio, can you come back with us? That's a question to you.
Yes, I'm back.
So we need to definitely verify that there is any, like one of the sources of public support that you mentioned. But does it mean that like it should be 50% through these sources, that it should be like 50% of public support, or it can be 10%, for example, from some development national fund, and 40% will be some private equity?
Yes, the last one is correct. So you could have, you need to reach 50%, but it could be 10% of public support and completed with equity or with own investment or with deferrals. So as long as you have one of the eligible sources, you can complement it with all the, so to say, not specifically eligible sources.
Okay, thank you. So now looks like I can share. It will be 1 minute just to summarize and to show actually the important links that can be useful. So one more time, my name is Alexandra Kostina. I will move maybe for Ukrainian, it will be better. Мене звати Олександра Костіна, я представник України в Єврімаж. І Серджо Гарсія, з яким ми сьогодні спілкувалися, він project менеджер Eurimages, відповідно відповідав на всі запитання. Якщо у вас будуть виникати питання щодо аплікації, ви можете звертатися до мене, я далі надам свій імейл, і я відповідно буду вас вже контактувати з тим project менеджером, який буде відповідати за той напрям, який цікавий саме вам. Дуже важливо контактувати заздалегідь, тому що, як вже було сказано, якщо аплікація подана і вона відхилена через невідповідність, другого разу вже податися не можна. Але якщо ще на стадії аплікації в результаті консультації ви зрозумієте, що вона невідповідна, ви можете її самостійно забрати і податися, у вас ще буде шанс податися наступного разу. Тож, як summary, перша найбільша можливість – це Eurimages Production Support. А ви бачите, тут є посилання, за яким ви можете знайти всю інформацію, де можна розпочати вже подання. Найближчий дедлайн 8 вересня 2026 року. Як казав Серджо, взагалі їх 3. Один в січні, квітні, вересні. Відповідно, ви можете планувати своє подання. Я би вам радила, якщо ви плануєте, в принципі, працювати з проектами в якості міжнародної копродукції, якщо ви плануєте, чи вже у вас є залучення якихось незалежних міжнародних фінансувань, чи ви плануєте їх, хоча б от зараз, поки відкрита зараз платформа, і є можливість ознайомитися з усіма умовами подання, з усіма документами, які треба подати, просто хоча б цього разу ознайомитися, задати всі питання, які у вас можуть виникнути. У нас будуть ще такі додаткові зустрічі, де ви зможете їх задати, і відповідно вже бути готовими до того, можливо, не цього разу, але, наприклад, вже на січень вже бути готовими, щоб цю аплікацію подати. Для вашого такого натхнення за цей період, коли Україна є частиною Eurimages, було підтримано 6 мажоритарних українських проєктів, де українські продюсери виступали мажоритарними продюсерами на загальну суму більш ніж 1 мільйон євро. Ви бачите перелік цих проєктів тут, які були підтримані. І нагадую, що є 2 способи підтримки. Один до 150 тисяч євро. Це субсидія, тобто вона не має повертатися. Якщо ж більше 150 тисяч євро до 500 тисяч євро, ця підтримка має бути повернена з усіх надходжень, які будуть вже потім у фільму приходити. Друга можливість, також я даю посилання, це Eurimages Production Development Award. Тут нижче перелік тих маркетів, на які, якщо ви потрапляєте на цей маркет, якщо вас обирають, то ви можете претендувати на цю нагороду. За останній період 12 українських копродукційних фільмів отримали таку нагороду. Кожний проєкт отримає 20 тисяч євро у формі гранту на розвиток проєкту. Загальна сума – це 240 тисяч євро, як ви бачите, була отримана за цей час українськими проєктами. І остання можливість – це промоушен, яка створюється в колаборації з Українським інститутом. Єдине, що я це посилання тут вставляю, але чогось сьогодні заходила на сайт, чогось не працює Український інститут, мабуть, може якісь технічні проблеми, вони відновлять його. Тут ви можете подаватися на етапі, коли у вас вже проєкт завершений, для його міжнародного релізу 8 тисяч євро підтримка. За останні роки, за цей період було підтримано 26 українських проєктів за підтримки Eurimages. І даю свою пошту. Будь ласка, для того, щоб, якщо у вас виникають питання, ви можете звертатися щодо них. Так, повертаємося тоді до запитань. So, Sergio, back to you and to questions that we have.
Yes.
First question is, okay, this one is about the series co-production support. If Ukraine can submit the project that was initiated by Ukraine. But as I know that Ukraine didn't sign this series co-production support agreement, so actually the answer is no, if understood, and that Ukraine actually can apply if the majority producer is another producer who signed this series co-production support. And Ukraine is this minority who is outside of the system. So what is the maximum then percentage of the share Ukraine can have for such serious co-production support?
Yes, so as you are mentioning, Ukraine is not part of the series pilot program. What I would suggest here is, because this is a program that is not technically part of Eurimages, but of the Council of Europe, and it's managed by different colleagues, is for you to contact them if you are co-producing a series that you want to apply with. To contact our colleagues. The information is on the Eurimages website as well. And they can give you the exact details of the conditions. But as you were mentioning, the main aspect is that Ukraine is not at this stage part of the fund, so it would act as non-member of the fund state with the limitations that are similar to the ones in the co-production support.
Thank you. Then another one, are regional funds, for example, like not public main state fund, but regional funds, they're included in the eligibility to cover this 50% of their country. So like if national state fund didn't give money, but regional fund gave some percentage of the money.
Yes, absolutely. Regional funds, local funds, even supranational funds are considered as eligible sources of financing. So regional funds and local funds are eligible, and even supranational funds are considered as an eligible source of financing for the different countries that are involved in the support.
Actually, regarding the last one that you mentioned, we have European Solidarity Fund for Ukraine, and that's the second part of this question. So, like, should it be divided between countries, Ukraine co-producer, or it should be on Ukraine side? I can ask from my side regarding like what I know that actually that's the question of negotiation between producers. So like even if you decide in co-production share to divide it, when you put it like actually as a location, you can allocate it as Ukrainian financing only. Is it correct or not? And will it count as Ukrainian public financing if it will be European Solidarity Fund?
Yes, it will count as Ukrainian financing, as an eligible source of financing. In any case, we are flexible in terms of how the fund is split, as long as this is approved by the Solidarity Fund. But yes, we have seen all kind of splits decided by the co-producer. So you can either allocate it fully to Ukraine or split it between the co-producers.
Okay, one more question. Does a producer from a country that is not a member of the Council of Europe, such as UK, also have to confirm that 50% of the funding comes from their own country?
Yes, when you have producers from non-member states, they have to comply with the same obligations in terms of eligibility.
Okay, which co-producers receive bank transfer? Ukrainian or like the one who applying to Eurimages, or is it shared between co-producers? And is VAT included or not included?
So you can choose for the payment to be made into a single account of one of the co-producers, or to have it split between the co-producers. So in the financing plan, you have to split the Eurimages support. As I was mentioning, you can split it proportionately or disproportionately, and then for payments, you can choose to have payments made into each co-producer's bank account. In that case, we would make the payment split as you have indicated in the financing plan, or you can choose to have the full payment made into one single bank account. And regarding the VAT, there is no VAT applied because the Council of Europe as an institution does not generate VAT. So the payment is a net payment without VAT.
Okay, that's all questions as I understood this for now. We can give a few minutes if some will arise additionally. Just maybe as well from my side, if you can one more time to make it in more details regarding this allocating. So like for Ukrainian projects, last years were really like challenging just because that like to show that we have 50% of the financing was quite complicated, even if we will apply as minority producers. So can you one more time just like to specify this allocating? So like, for example, when we are making financing plan, and it's understandable that Ukraine is, for example, minority and have only 10% of the project. But even from this 10%, Ukraine is not reaching 50%. So can another country allocate some part of her confirmed financing as part of Ukrainian financing or not? And what about this allocation of Eurimages? So Eurimages is not count as like confirmed financing. Yes, when we reach this like 50% minimum is confirmed. So something that we look like from Eurimages, it doesn't count as confirmed financing.
Yes. So I mean, we realize that is challenging. The advice to this respect, there are two different challenges. One would be to reach the minimum financing that the applicable treaty requires. So be it a minimum of 10% financing or 20% or 5%, depending on the treaty that is applicable. In order to reach that amount, what you can play with is with a disproportionate allocation of the Euromage support. So you could increase the Eurimages share of support to the benefit of the Ukrainian minority co-producer, for example. As I said, with the limit of up to 50% of the Eurimages support, and that would help increase the total financing coming from Ukraine. Now, as you were saying, correctly, the Eurimages support is not taken as confirmed support, obviously, because you are still applying to it. So in terms of increasing the confirmed financing, where we are giving flexibilities as we just discussed about the Solidarity Fund. So if the project has a Solidarity Fund, that is a way where you can do a disproportionate allocation to increase the financing coming from Ukraine. If not, then the possibilities that you can always try to exhaust are questions like the deferred fees, own investment, and you can combine them with with sources of with other sources of financing, such as so if the project doesn't have strong public support, for example, it has a minor amount of public support, you can complement this with other sources of financing, like the deferred fees or own investment. Those would be the possibilities. What we unfortunately cannot accept is allocating public support from another country as part of the Ukrainian financing.
Okay, and the last question, because I know that you have a limit of time. Okay, two, but very small. First, if a Ukrainian production company receive funding from Eurimages, is it possible to pay for work carried out, for example, in Slovakia, and can then they also claim a tax rebate on this amount or not?
So if I understand the question correctly, is
so if Ukrainian production company received part of Eurimages support, and then this part that was actually dedicated to Ukraine, is it possible to spend it in Slovakia? And if they will spend this part in Slovakia, can they claim a tax rebate for this amount?
Yeah. So Eurimages support does not have any strings attached in terms of where the money needs to be spent. So you can spend the money elsewhere as you wish. There is no requirement as to having to spend it specifically in one of the countries.
Okay, and can it tax rebate can be claimed for this spending, like
that would be a question then for the national authorities as to how to deal with it. But
you don't have any restrictions
from the point of view of Eurimages, we don't have any restrictions in terms of expenditure.
Okay, and the last one for today is about audiovisual materials. Is providing a project storyboard among audiovisual materials mandatory, or could it be any other materials, visual presentation, teaser? That's first question. And second question, do we also need to provide a detailed shooting schedule?
So when you fill the application, you will see that there is a list of the detailed materials that are compulsory, and then there are other materials that are complementary and that can be submitted if you want or not. So, for example, with the audiovisual materials, we are quite free in the sense that we let you the possibility of adding materials if you have them, but if you don't have them, they are not compulsory. And as for the shooting schedule, there we request specific shooting schedules by days so that we make sure. I mean, especially in the case of fictions, in the case of documentaries, we understand that the days are perhaps not so fixed, but if there is an issue in terms of the where we have doubts about the 80% shooting threshold, then we may request more detail about the shooting schedule.
Okay, so just like as a reminder that it shouldn't be not more than 50% of shooting days done at the moment when the decision is made, not application, but decision. So
Yes, this is the most important thing.
detailed shooting plan is actually important to understand by dates. Like if you have, for example, 35 dates, when you will reach actually this like 15, 16 days. So if it will still be after the results will be delivered.
Exactly. So that's why we request a specific shooting schedule with the exact number of days of shooting and the exact dates in which the shooting is taking place. Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question, but I will answer it by my own, and I know because I know that you need to run and we're already a bit late. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation, and it's very valuable. I really hope that Ukrainian producers will take advantage of this possibility, especially now, like when we have like some financing from board, from public fund. We are really grateful for Ministry of Culture and for Ukrainian State Film Agency that they worked hardly actually to make this possible. And one more time, we hope that we will have more meetings in the future so that like we will have much more applications from Ukraine in the future. Yes. Thank you so much for your time and for your input and for everything Eurimages is actually doing for Ukraine because it's unbelievable. Your support means a lot.
Thank you so much for your attention. And as I said, feel free to reach us, me or my colleagues at the Secretariat, if you have specific questions with one of your projects. If you want to send us the financing plan, we can give it a quick look and try to help solve your questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Bye. And
Thank you.
answering the question of Olga Weber, can you recommend how to reach out French production companies for co-production? The easiest way is actually to go to any international market, especially for some French co-production markets, such as Les Arcs, for example, or Cannes Film Festival, Marche du Film Market. And there you can find lots of French production companies who are searching for co-producers. So it's not actually a question to Eurimages how to find a co-production partner. Actually, Eurimages expected you to come with already confirmed partnerships. So thank you and see everyone soon. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia, for organization. Bye.
Thank you.